Activision Blizzard are losing key employees due to their corporate vision, while also defending games against HUMVEEE, of all people. Microsoft are taking a bold step forward with the next generation, E3 leaks are beginning in earnest, and Anthem's roadmap has been taken out the back and shot. Plus, much more to come. Hey everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of the Roundup, the twice per week gaming news show where we fill you in on all the gaming news, and we're going to start it off with Activision Blizzard today. So, Dexterro, after writing a great report on the Overwatch League commissioner leaving for Epic Games, have followed up with another bombshell report. According to their sources, several high-profile and experienced staff are set to leave Activision Blizzard over the next 2 weeks, including the global product director for Blizzard Esports. Apparently, multiple sources have claimed that this is linked to low morale at the company with regards to their esports initiative. One source claims that, quote, people are getting really tired of working for Pete Vlastelica, who is currently the CEO of Activision Blizzard Esports Leagues. Apparently, this is thanks to his history in overseeing digital content for Fox Sports. Basically, it seems like his vision for esports at ActiBliz is that of heavily commercialized, televised sports, a far cry from the early days of esports, which is really where I got into that whole thing, which was really community-driven. A number of employees seem to disagree with his vision, but feel like there's no room for negotiation, with one source saying, right now, there's a feeling that a lot of the senior management just don't understand esports. We don't know exactly who is leaving yet, and if it is confined to just their esports division or not, but Dexterro claims, their list does have some pretty experienced names, like say Kim Pan. Overwatch League is left without its commissioner now, and it seems like some of the driving force behind Overwatch and Call of Duty esports, it seems like those people are beginning to flee the ship before it sinks. And this does bring me to another article posted by Cecilia D'Anastasio for Kotaku last week called Shady Numbers and Bad Business Inside the Esports Bubble. It explains, using statements from sources, that esports is perceived by many within it to be a bubble that's ready to burst, with a lot of investment not being repaid and the majority of teams in esports operating at a large loss. Of course, it's all funded by venture capital, and supposedly investors are being given inflated figures and promises of multi-million-dollar future revenue, while failing to mention that views are not turning into revenue in the way that the teams and owners and all that would like. If you're interested in esports, I definitely do recommend reading the article. It's pretty lengthy, but it's quite good. Overall, though, I bring it up to just provide some context for the point I'm going to make about Activision Blizzard. This is a prime case of the executives following the money, as opposed to building a healthy ecosystem for players. While there is no doubt that there are players and viewers who do enjoy the OWL significantly, it seems like everyone in the business knows it's unsustainable and that they've been pushing for short-term financial investment instead of growing naturally. And from talking to 3 of my own sources on this, I can basically confirm a lot of the inner thoughts of people who are involved with the OWL. It looks like the executive level employees are seeing the inflated numbers from various sources and see the comparisons to traditional sports. I mean, from their view, if online gaming is the next big thing that's replacing sports for watch time, then surely they can make just as much money through the same methods or more, right? Well, that just does not seem to be the case in how it's playing out. And this is the sort of behavior that we can only really expect from a big, large company, although they seemingly are aware that their approach towards game development hasn't really been working as of the last few years. The organization itself, Activision Blizzard, does seem to be going through quite a lot of change, so hopefully they can wake up to their mistakes sooner rather than later and, don't tank a segment of esports with them. That said, I wouldn't hold my breath. And actually, on top of that, there is another Activision Blizzard story. They are defending video games from the law, although in a bit of a strange way. Back in 2017, AM General, the manufacturer of HUMVEEE vehicles, sued Activision Blizzard for violation of trademark, citing the HUMVEE's inclusion in the Call of Duty games and their marketing materials. The case has been going on for quite some time now, but Activision Blizzard, in a filing from last week, said this: "This case is nothing less than a direct attack on the First Amendment right to produce creative works that realistically depict contemporary warfare." So it's a pretty wild situation. While this is Activision Blizzard using the strongest tool in their arsenal to defend themselves from trademark infringement, it very well could work in the favor of games if it is established. Having a case on record of a game series that depicts modern warfare being protected by the First Amendment in this way would probably set a good precedent. While games have been defended from Californian lawmakers by the Supreme Court in the name of the First Amendment way back in 2011, this, I suppose, would set a little bit more precedence in a different area. Of course, though, only if the hearing ends up going in the industry's favor. However, the whole topic of trademark versus the First Amendment certainly is an interesting one, and I will be following this case to see how it turns out. Next, we've got something to talk about with Xbox. So, when discussing Microsoft's E3 plans, Windows Central said there's actually a possibility that Xbox Game Studios titles will launch for both the new Xbox Scarlet consoles and the current Xbox One range. Basically, there's just whisperings that Xbox won't really focus on new console exclusives only for their new device. They'll do it for both. And it's a sort of risky maneuver. Honestly, it sounds like it could be a bit of a death blow to the early days of the Xbox Scarlet console. If you own an Xbox One and there's an exciting new Xbox game, you wouldn't need to buy a Scarlet to play it, although undoubtedly the Scarlet would give you a better experience. Given how almost every console manufacturer has relied heavily on both loss leading and exclusives to grow their install base, this report just seems a bit unlikely from Windows Central. However, a part of it, and this is kind of why I bring it up, would fit with Microsoft's new approach to selling games. They sort of seem to be preparing for the death of consoles. And that seems a bit wild to say, considering they're releasing a new one, but when you think about it, the financial reason for having a huge install base is that you earn the biggest cut possible from selling your games, and potentially from the third-party games on your console. Whether or not people upgrade from the Xbox One to the Scarlet immediately, that's not going to matter for Xbox right away overall. If you're a console gamer and you want to play an Xbox game, you're going to do it on an Xbox, be it an Xbox One or an Xbox Scarlet, and Microsoft will get that sale price. However, if you're a PC gamer, well, they now have you covered with Game Pass coming to PC and their commitment to putting their Xbox Game Studios titles on Steam. They seem to understand that consumers are happier and are more likely to buy games when they're given a good value, either through, say, a subscription or the game being readily available on a platform of choice, maybe like the Xbox they own or perhaps like Steam. It certainly is a step away from the console war, with them seemingly conceding to Sony's dominance on that market. Not to say they're exiting the market, though. They know that many millions of people love their Xbox consoles and will continue to play on them. I'm just guessing that Scarlet is an attempt to keep pace with the industry while keeping the existing customers happy so that they can take other steps to widen their audience, like with xCloud and with Game Pass. Microsoft really do just seem to be all about selling all their games wherever they can and getting as much of the pie as they can, and that is a pretty stark contrast to the way they used to operate, which was all getting people into their ecosystem and locking them in. They seem to have learnt their lesson from the Windows Store and maybe the Windows Phone, initiatives that did not really pan out. It seems like in today's market, going to the consumer is a pretty good thing to do, especially when consumers seem to be pretty tired about everybody trying to lock them in. Ultimately, though, we will just have to wait until E3 to see if we do get some Scarlet news, but we know for sure that they're going to have plenty of games there, and at the end of the day, is that not what they've been missing, so definitely a good thing. Now, it is a week before E3 starts in earnest, but we actually do have a lot to discuss about it, including leaks. So first we have Watch Dogs Legion, which was leaked by Amazon UK. Now, this is not the first leak from Ubisoft, as their Rocket League but roller derby game Roller Champions was leaked a while ago, and while that one is interesting, it is just a rumor. Watch Dogs Legion, though, well, that has been confirmed by Jason Schreier through his Ubisoft sources. Legion, we've known for a while now that the next Watch Dogs would be set in London. What we didn't know is that it will have a decently fantastical gimmick at play. You'll be able to play as any NPC in the game after you recruit them. It sounds kind of absurd. We'll just have to see if they actually use it well in their mechanics. It could be really innovative and fun, or it could just be a gimmick. Right now, we have no idea. But I suppose it's good to see them trying out new things with that series. I believe that Ubisoft will have more to show off, though, but Jason Schreier did say on Twitter when asked about Splinter Cell, I think people hoping for Splinter Cell this year are in for disappointment. Now, given how well connected Schreier is with Ubisoft, I think this can only really mean two things based on his wording. Splinter Cell will be announced for 2020. He did say this year, after all. Either that or no Splinter Cell news whatsoever. Of course, I love Splinter Cell. I would love to hear something there, so hopefully. At any rate, Ubisoft do need to incentivize their employees to keep their lips sealed a little bit better, though, because they're a very leaky operation. The next game that we shouldn't have heard about, but have heard about, is Fable Fable 4. That has been leaked, and that definitely does take a big surprise out of Microsoft's hands, but with a game as high a profile as that, I think it would always be hard to keep it under wraps. The long-awaited sequel has had some information come out, including that the world has been revamped entirely, supposedly 2 asteroid strikes later, and the whole world looks a bit different and has a different name. We don't have much information to go on, though, other than it being developed in the Unreal Engine, having multiplayer capabilities, being completely open, and the game being designed so that you can ignore its main quest. Given Fable's past, though, to be honest with you, I wouldn't really get my hopes up. Open world games with a scope like Fable are, I think, maybe a bit easier to make when you can count the polygons on screen, and if the rumors that Playground Games are making this are true, well, it would be their first endeavor on a non-Forza project. So look, I'm interested to see what a new Fable, a Fable of today, would look like, but I'm not necessarily that excited. Next, though, an update on Anthem. So they have dumped their roadmap, they've thrown it in the bin, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Quite some time after saying that they knew they couldn't really keep it up. And that's a pretty good admission, being real. But what they've replaced it with is rather worrying, because the roadmap has been thrown in the bin and replaced with nothing. The game's page now shows content that has recently been added to the game, but there is zero indication of what future plans actually are. This definitely is very worrying for the future of the game, but I suppose it is better than a large page full of optimistic, wishes, or I suppose lies that they wouldn't actually do that would string people along. Still, it's a sad downhill slide from this game. I suppose admission is the first step to improving, so I'll be interested to see what they actually have planned for Act 2 and Act 3. Suffice to say, they're going to have to be bloody massive to get people back into that game, given just how much they have been burned over the last few months. And then we have one last point to touch on, Google Stadia. So, Google have their Stadia Connect event happening this week. We've already heard substantial rumors, though, that Baldur's Gate 3 will be the headline of the show as far as games are concerned. They might have some big hitters to draw the eyes, but as long as they don't make games Stadia exclusives, I'm sure people won't mind that much. But of course, if some things are Stadia exclusives, well, obviously that will begin to tick off audiences. Now, on another Stadia note, I have seen people call Stadia into question given the recent Google outage that they had. And to me, that's not much of a concern, although it does serve to remind us that streaming services are a little bit more volatile. Online servers or our connection to them going downhill, well, that's going to really impede your ability to play any games. Although I suppose that actually is a factor in the industry it has been for a while, because so many games do require to be always online. Streaming services do make this worse for sure, but Stadia won't actually impact this too much more than any other streaming services. Using Google outages to, sort of sell that Stadia has a massive problem, I mean, fair enough, but those Google outages, they only happen once or twice a year, so I think it's a little bit unfair to overstate that point, although the core point still absolutely is there. This is a major reason why streaming services should be an option and not the only way, as much as they certainly could be quite convenient. But there you go, that is it for another episode of The Roundup. Today is only a little glimpse of what we're going to have at E3, and in terms of gaming news, it's actually quite exciting. So let me know what you think about Activision Blizzard's ways, and if you are excited for E3. And let's finish today off with a Patreon question from Stacey R. Huff, who said, in light of all the craziness going on with AAA gaming right now, there's one question that keeps on coming up for me. How much do these high-profile names really have to do with the game? How much does someone like Todd Howard or Randy Pitchford really affect the final product? Man, I love Borderlands, but I'd hate to think that some of the parts that I love come from Randy. Well, I'd say some of the parts that people love probably do come from Randy. Overall, though, that is just totally going to be on a per-company basis. It really is. It's like, that is the short version. The long version is, it kind of depends on the company culture, like how many projects a company has. Like if a company has, say, 3 or 4 games running, right, then yeah, the person at the top, the executives, they're not going to have as much day-to-day responsibilities on those games. However, if it's a case like, say, you've got, going back to the past, Mike Morhaime at the top of Blizzard, and then you've got, Mike's top man in World of Warcraft, whoever that might be. Maybe it's J. Allen Brack as the producer, or Jonathan Haidt now, I believe, who's the, I think he's the overall head guy there, but it's just going to depend on the company structure, essentially. Generally, with the executive sort of type people, it's more the reason why they're there and that they have the high wages and all the, the sort of the high value and all of that responsibility is because they're mainly decision makers, So it's less about how much do they do, and it's more about just them acting as key decision makers, giving the yes-no decisions to extremely, extremely expensive questions. So, I mean, yeah, they might get paid a lot of money, but in terms of the amount of budget that they are sort of directing, that's also sort of massive. And to what degree a exec is going to be involved, I mean, it just depends on their job title. It depends on where they are in the chain. Like, say, a Randy Pitchford, he might get pulled away with CEO duties a lot more than, than with another company. But that said, Gearbox is also a privately owned company, so who the hell knows? It kind of depends. Do you have a CEO founder type who's still pretty attached to their product? Or do you have an external CEO who's like came in from another industry, whose skill set is more about the operational parts of running a company and securing funding and things like that? It really does depend. I suppose broadly speaking, it's like, is it a grassroots company with a founder CEO and that sort of type of executive team who are just, more sort of natives within the games industry? Or are you dealing with a larger company who has done more external hiring for people who have experience at C-level positions, but like less so within the games industry? And then to do one final example, take somebody like Ian Hazzikostas, the game director for World of Warcraft. That's an example of a sort of executive-like employee who is very tied to the game, but I would imagine from just reading into, say, his role, that it primarily is just he's there for steering the ship and for like the yes-no decision making of how do we do this, how do we actually get this team moving in a direction. That's basically, I mean, that's a lot of speculation there. That's as best as I can answer that question, really without having insider knowledge of the company. So I hope you found it interesting. Still, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon. And with that, I'll see you next time.